Hi everybody, this is Karen from Golden Diary, and today I invited Calum McSwiggan. He's a great content creator, a traveler. He has been in more than 25 countries, and he's the author of 4 books. On top of that, he managed to maintain his fitness routine. So I thought it was really interesting to invite him and uh, for him to share his experience with us. Welcome, Callum.
Thank you so much.
Well, would you tell us a little bit about your background and what did you start this lifestyle?
Yeah, I think I have always had a love for travel, and it was never something that I ever really intended to be a part of my job or my career. It was just a genuine passion for travel. I think it comes from my parents moved to Spain when I was 16 years old. So I've always kind of had that long distance relationship with my family. So I've been getting on planes from a very young age. And I think that's where the love of travel came from. Uh, so I started sharing my experiences online, and I started to realize that people were very interested and people wanted to come along on the journey. Um, so that's kind of how I started to become an influencer. I used to write a travel blog. I've been on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all over the internet. And I also, my first book, Eat, Gay, Love, was a LGBT travel memoir talking about my experiences traveling the world as a gay man specifically, and some of the LGBT plus people I met around the world and their stories as well as mine.
Wow, that's amazing. What has been the most challenging thing that has happened to you during these years of traveling?
That is a difficult question. I feel like travel comes with a lot of challenges. I've had many things go wrong, from the smaller kind of things where, travel delays and interruptions, but to some more scary things as well that have happened to me over the years. I've had some extremely negative experiences when traveling in India, for instance, where
Well,
I was targeted, essentially had money stolen from me in quite an aggressive manner. Again, this is something I talk about in my first book, Eat, Gay, Love. So I've definitely experienced some of that. But what I always like to come back to is that the wonderful positive experiences I've had, even in India, talking about India, where I've had negative experiences. I love India. I've been back since I had those negative experiences. I'm going back again this year. Um, it's a wonderful country, and I only have positive things to say about it. There's always going to be those small bad things that happen, but it never deters me, because for every bad thing that happens, there's 100 wonderful things. And that's, I guess, is what keeps me traveling.
wow. How did you overcome that situation when happened?
Uh, I guess the situation in India, panic, but just keep moving forward and understanding that everything negative that has ever happened to me, it's always worked out fine in the end. Obviously, people need to be safe when traveling, and I always, obviously recommend always get yourself out of any bad situation as quickly as possible. Always put your safety first before anything else. But generally speaking, everything is always fine in the end. So I just try to keep that positivity, and there's always a way to figure your way out of a problem. And yeah, things have always worked out this far. So I touch wood. Things hopefully will always work out positively going forwards.
Wow, that's an amazing message. I think that's important. Like, no, nothing is perfect,
Yeah,
100%. So we can
exactly.
learn about all the situations. And as an experienced traveler, would you give us safety tips? What would you recommend us?
Safety tips, always make sure that somebody knows where you are. I use Find My Friends. So I have uh, what do you call it? I have an AirTag in my backpack. My friends and my parents have access to that AirTag, so they can see where my backpack is. And then I also use Find My Friends, so my friends can see it's where my phone is, but usually my phone is with me, so my friends can see exactly
Yeah.
where I am, or at least where my phone is. So that makes me feel a little bit safer. Also, but always tell somebody where I'm going as well, just so somebody has that firsthand information. I find it helpful to let's say I'm going on a hike somewhere where traveling, I find it helpful to just let a member of hotel staff or somebody like that know where you're going. I mean, that's the number one rule of hiking, is to always let somebody know where you're going.
Well,
But I think it's just a general, it's a great rule in general. And then some things that I think are quite obvious, but that probably bears repeating as well, is to always have some spare cash with you, usually hidden away, whether that's in a money belt or I don't do it anymore, but I used to tuck money into my sock just to have that emergency money. And also, not to flash your valuables in public. I know people like to take pictures and things when traveling, pictures and videos. I do myself. It's my job to do that. But always just be aware of your surroundings before you take out a phone and start, flashing it around. And just to protect my valuables, I always, if I'm taking pictures, I keep two hands on my phone. I make sure I'm looking around, looking who's around me, because it's not necessarily just your possessions that are at risk. I think that's what people think about. They think, oh no, what if my phone gets stolen? But it could be worse than that. It's what if somebody attacks you in order to get hold of your
yeah.
phone. I know there are places, I don't like to generalize any country, because I think safety around the world is quite a complex issue. But I know there are some places in South America, for instance, where they highly recommend, not showing your valuables, because you could potentially get attacked for them. So it's just being aware of risks that you might face, and just being sensible, but never let any of these things deter you. Also, I think a lot of people, they read stories and they hear negative things that happen to people when they're traveling, and they let it put them off from traveling. Um, don't let the things put you off. Just be aware of the issues and learn how to navigate them.
Oh, that's something definitely to watch out.
Yes,
And thank you for the safety tips.
of course.
I would like to ask you, when you started, were you working for someone else, or did you already have income from your books?
I've been traveling for many, many years. I've been traveling since I was a teenager, solo traveling always. Um, but it kind of became my career as a travel influencer and a writer. It's been my full-time job for maybe 6 or 7 years now. But it was only this year that I decided that I wanted to be a nomad, to give up my home, to give up my base, and commit to full-time travel. Um, and the reason was, I would love to tell you it was some exciting reason that came from an absolute love and passion for travel. And there was definitely an element of that in there. But the reality is, it was a financial issue for me. Living in London, one of the most expensive cities in the world, that is only becoming increasingly more expensive, facing incredibly difficult cost of living crisis right now. Rent's going up, food's going up, bills are going up. It's becoming harder and harder to live there. I know this is the case for many places around the world, and it's not uniquely a London issue, but London is definitely one of the more challenging places to live. I lived there for 10 years, and I found that despite the amount of money I was earning going up, it wasn't going up by enough to
Yeah.
cover these increasing demands. And I just couldn't afford to live there anymore. My landlord was looking to put my rent up again, and I was like, I physically do not have the money to pay for this. So what is my option? And I did start looking around at, maybe moving to another town or moving somewhere else. And then I realized that last year, because I travel for work and I travel for passion, um, last year I spent less than 4 months. If you added up all the time I spent in the UK last year, if you put all the days together, I realized I'd spent less than 4 months in the country. And yet I was paying full
Less than
rent.
4.
Less than 4 months, yes.
Wow.
Uh, but I was paying full rent that whole
Mhm.
time. I was paying all this rent for an apartment that I was never in. And so it made me question, do I need that apartment, or would it be cheaper to travel? And I think this is something that don't a lot of people don't quite understand, that part of the story, that it's cheaper for me to travel the world
Oh,
than
yeah.
it was for me to live in London. That's something that's quite challenging for people to get their heads around. But I did the numbers before I made this decision, realized that it would be significantly cheaper to travel than it would be to keep an apartment. And now I've been doing it. I've been doing it for almost 6 months now. And I can confirm that it's not just numbers on paper. The reality is that it is significantly cheaper than living in London, at least where the costs were high. So, that money I spent on rent, I now spend on hotels and Airbnbs. The money I would spend on food in London goes so much further when traveling. And it's not that I only travel to cheap destinations either. I've spent a lot of time in places that are significantly cheaper than the UK. Um, Places like Thailand, for instance. I spent a month in Thailand this year, incredibly affordable compared to the UK. But I've also visited expensive destinations too. I spent a month traveling in the USA, which is the prices are comparable to the UK. But as long as I'm sort of aware of my overall budget, this month I'm going to be somewhere cheaper. This month I'm going to be somewhere more expensive. It tends to work out cheaper. And in the 6 months that I've been doing this, I've spent significantly less than I would have on rent just living in the UK.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience, because I think a lot of people wants to start to traveling, but they feel like they are tied up to their jobs,
Yeah.
so they don't know exactly how to start to create this lifestyle and to have more flexibility and more time freedom to do more things. So I
Yeah.
want to ask you, do you have sponsorships? Do you have grants?
Yeah, so I think this is the challenging part for most people, is the fact that they need sustainable income while they're traveling. And I understand that in a lot of careers, if you're a doctor, if you're a firefighter, if you're, so many careers, this isn't an option to you. And I understand the frustration in that. But there are many, many careers where you can now work remotely. I think, the awful thing that happened to the world, which was COVID, but I think there was almost a silver lining in that, is that it changed the way we think about work, and remote work especially. There are a lot more people working from home now, and a lot more people working remotely from elsewhere. They're traveling while they work now. More and more careers are enabling people to do this. So I think if you want to live a lifestyle like this one, if you want to be a nomad and travel the world, it's about looking at your options in your career specifically. So for me, I'm a writer. I write books. I'm also a journalist. So I do travel journalism while I'm traveling. So that's one of my income streams. And then also I'm a travel influencer. So I do work while traveling, as you said, some sponsorships and things. So I work with some incredible brands, some amazing people like booking.com, for instance, as somebody I work closely with. And that also opens up another revenue stream for me, whether that's this year I've done I've sat on a panel in Japan to talk about being LGBT plus in the travel industry in Japan. That's another way for me to earn money. So I kind of have quite a few different income streams, and it just about makes enough money for me to live on. It can be tricky, and budgeting and finding the work and all of that, but it just about works, and I get to live this amazing life. So, but yeah, you don't need to be a travel journalist or an influencer to do this. I have one friend who is a nomad and he works in finance. And I have another friend, he's not a nomad, he has a base in New York, but he travels a lot. He travels for maybe 6 months a year, and he does code, he writes code.
Um,
So there are different jobs in which you can do this. I appreciate that it's not available to everyone, but you might be surprised. You might be sitting there thinking, "Oh, well, my career, I could never do that." But it's and yes, there are some jobs where you couldn't, but there are some where you might be surprised and you might be able to do it remotely and travel.
yeah, so maybe it's about trying and figuring out how to get to the point to have that flexibility and have
Absolutely.
more time.
And also, this is a controversial thing to say, perhaps, but if it's something you're incredibly passionate about, if you're incredibly passionate about traveling the world and becoming a nomad, then, and your career doesn't allow for that, then maybe a career shift. Maybe there's a career that's adjacent to yours that you could
Mhm.
move into.
Okay,
Books.
3 books.
I wish there were more. I've been featured in another book, which is, I think, where the fourth one has come from, but I've only authored 3 books myself.
Okay, that's great. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your books?
Yeah, sure. My first book is called Eat, Gay, Love. It's an LGBT plus travel memoir about my experiences traveling the world. So that is about that's not about my life currently. That was about my life in my early 20s, where I worked overseas in various jobs. So not as a digital nomad like I am now. I was predominantly then working as an English teacher um, in a lot of European countries. So I was a teacher in Italy, Switzerland, Germany, etc. And I also spent some time in India between jobs, and also some time living and working in Thailand, where I was working in an animal sanctuary. Um, so that book talks about those experiences 10 years ago now. And then I've since then I've also moved into writing some young adult fiction. So I write LGBT plus romance for teenagers, especially, which is kind of a little bit like living vicariously through my characters, because as a queer teenager myself back then, I never got to be out and proud. I never got to experience romance as a kid in high school. So kind of living a little bit vicariously through the characters there. So I have two more books. I have Straight Expectations, which came out last year, and Masquerade, which is finished, but it doesn't come out until next summer.
Wow, that's amazing. And how do you manage to take care of yourself, to travel, to work, because you also work as a journalist?
You have to be incredibly disciplined, is what I will say. I have to set time aside to work, just like everybody does. Most people will work their 8-hour job, and I have to find that time as well, which can be incredibly difficult if. So recently, I was on deadline finishing my third book. In July was when the third book was due. Um, and I was in Thailand at the time, and I was staying on an amazing island called Koh Tao, which is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And the temptation was to just go out and explore the island every day. There was so much I wanted to do there. I really wanted to learn to dive there. I really wanted to get my diving license, and you can do it there for so cheap. And there's
Wow.
so many shacks along the beach where you can learn to dive, and it costs very, very little to do it. Um, but I knew that I had deadlines, and I needed to commit to those deadlines, because this is my career and this is my income. And if I don't meet those deadlines, then there's no money coming in, which means I can no longer live this lifestyle. So I was unable to do any of those things. I'm not complaining about that. That's just, how it is. I had to stay inside and focus on the work. But on the flip side of that, I was working in one of the most beautiful places in the world. I would sit with amazing views of the boats coming in and out along the beach. Um, the food is incredibly affordable there. So, I was able to order whatever food I want, amazing Thai food, brought to my table, sit in a restaurant with my laptop and work all day. But the most incredible work environment that I've ever had. It definitely beats sitting in my apartment in London, or sitting in an office, instead of sitting on a beautiful beach in Thailand working. So yes, I couldn't go and do the diving and the exploration and all of the amazing things I would have liked to have done if I was on vacation, for instance. Um, but this is my life. This is my full-time job now. So I have to be disciplined to actually do the work. So, and it's that constant challenge of constantly being in these amazing destinations, in these amazing places, um, but still being committed to doing the work, putting that time aside. But yeah, but I've got to work from so many amazing cafes. I was just in
Oh, I
Japan, and
love
their
that.
cafe scene over there is amazing. So every day I'd be in a different cafe working, and yeah, that's an amazing feeling, and I feel very, very lucky and privileged to do this. But it's still work. I think a lot of people think, especially because travel influencer, a lot of people, they'll follow my journey. And I do talk about the work a little bit, but mostly I'm just showing the highlights. I'm showing all the exciting things I'm doing. So I think a lot of people may look at it and think, oh, he's just on an endless vacation and all he does is
Hmm.
have fun. They're not actually seeing the hours and hours I spend at my laptop, whether I'm writing or whether I'm sending emails, pitching for more work, negotiating contracts, that kind of thing. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that you don't necessarily see from my social media.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your routine.
Of
And
course.
I've been told that there's a lot of entrepreneurs working in Thailand.
Mhm.
Had you had the chance to create meaningful connections there?
I think I was actually quite lucky in that I have some very good friends in Southeast Asia who are from Southeast Asia themselves. So I have a lot of Malaysian friends from spending quite a lot of time in Malaysia. And obviously, I lived in Thailand 10 years ago, so I already have those connections
Well,
there. So I made incredible connections there and spent a lot of time with wonderful people, but they were actually local people rather than fellow nomads, which is, to be honest, kind of what I prefer. I always prefer to make friends with the locals because that's how you really get to know a culture. And that's how, if you befriend locals, you'll have the best experience because they will show you the best things in that city, in that country. So that's always my priority. I haven't really met that many fellow nomads along the way, but there are a couple. There's an amazing influencer called Life Alongside Lauren. I don't know if you're aware of her. That's her Instagram handle. Um, and she travels with her whole family. So she has two young boys and her partner. I'm not sure if they're married or not, but her partner. Um, and they're also living the same lifestyle that I am, but as a family.
well,
And I find that fascinating. So, yeah, I've made a friendship with her. I haven't actually met her in person, despite us being in a lot of, we were both just in Japan at the same time, but on opposite sides of the country. But there's definitely that digital relationship there. Because I find it interesting to seeing somebody living the same life and how they're doing it, and just following her story kind of um, gives me ideas. And I like to think that maybe she thinks the same about following me. So yeah, we haven't met in person, but there is a connection there, which is wonderful. But yeah, I definitely hope to meet a few nomads along the way in my travels. But predominantly, yeah, I've just been making friends with locals who born and raised in the destinations I'm visiting.
yeah, for sure. Maybe it's easier to get to know better the places, the city, and as you say, the culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wanted to say that your content is of such high quality.
Oh,
And
thank you.
are there any apps or tools that you use to or would like to recommend for content creation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of like cameras and things, one of the questions I get all the time is, "Oh my God, what camera do you use?" This broken iPhone 12,
Oh,
which is like, I don't know, 5 years old. It's extremely broken. I don't have any fancy camera kit or anything. I always say that uh, if you want to create content, just do it with whatever you have. I feel like 99% of us have a smartphone of some description. It probably has a camera. You use that. You don't need fancy equipment. Sure, if you have the funds and the means available to you, sure, you can invest in a camera that will increase the quality of your content. But you don't need it. I think that's a mistake a lot of people think. They think they need this extremely expensive kit. And then in terms of just editing apps and things, I just use, there's one app I actually really, really recommend. It's called Captions.
oh,
And it just makes it really easy to add beautiful captions to my videos because I always want my content to be accessible. So for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, I always want the captions to be there. It also makes it easier for people who aren't necessarily native English speakers
mhm.
to have
Maybe.
the captions there. So it says, yeah, exactly. So I always like to make sure that the captions are there. But sometimes some of the, no disrespect to Instagram or TikTok or anything, but they have their inbuilt captions
Yeah.
tools. I think they look quite ugly and they make so many mistakes. They will add captions to your video, but it will be all wrong, or not all wrong, but a lot of it will be wrong. It will translate it wrong. So I love captions um, because they give beautiful captions that are really, really accurate. And if there are any changes, if there are any mistakes, which there are occasionally, you can just change those and fix them. So I highly recommend captions. Makes your content more accessible. Also, so many people, there's like a statistic out there, I'm going to get it wrong, but something like 80% of people, maybe it's not quite that high, a high number of people watch Instagram with the sound turned off. I know I do a
Yeah.
lot of the time. So if you haven't got captions on your video, people will just keep scrolling because
Yeah.
they don't know what you're saying. They're not going to turn the sound on for you. So make sure your videos have captions, and Captions app is a great one to use. Not sponsored by them. I wish I was.
I tried once. I think you're right. It's really accurate. It's really nice to use. And
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
thank you so much, Calum. And to end this interview, I would like to ask you, do you have any advice about all these years traveling and also your experience that would you like to share with us?
I think a, an enormous barrier to travel for a lot of people is the financial side of it. And I think there is this idea out there that travel is an extremely expensive luxury thing. And it definitely can be. It can be expensive, it can be luxury, but you can also do it for cheap. And you don't necessarily have to be a budget traveler in order to make it affordable. So I generally don't stay. I have stayed in hostels, but generally speaking, I don't stay in hostels. I stay in hotels and Airbnbs. I like to have my own space so that I can work, etc. So I don't think I necessarily live a budget lifestyle, um, but I am able to travel the world through. There are so many tricks and tips and ways to make travel more affordable. And it's definitely doable. I've never been somebody who earns a lot of money. Um, I actually earn right now less than the average person in the UK, but I am living this lifestyle where I travel the world constantly because I've made it affordable. So I understand that there are people out there who earn significantly less than I do. I understand that there are people, single mothers out there who travel is essentially impossible for them. I do understand that, but I think for the average person, that there are ways to do it. I always talk about one of my first ever solo trips. I took a bus from the UK to Amsterdam.
Wow.
Uh, the bus, I think the bus was $7, $8
How
to take the
long?
bus. It was long. It was long. Like, I'm not saying this is the most comfortable experience. It was long. I think it was many hours. I can't remember how many. And I stayed in a hostel, which was a few dollars a night. And then I just ate food from the supermarket while I was there. And I did this the first solo trip I ever did as a teenager. And I spent like $20. Like, there are ways that you can do it and make it affordable. There's an amazing influencer I highly recommend, Cheap Holiday Expert, Chelsea. She is absolutely amazing at showing the different kind of things you can do on a budget. She recently did a trip to Albania, Tirana, I think, where she did the whole trip, a weekend away in Albania, for less than £100 British.
Wow.
So she's a great person to follow. She shows how affordable it can be, and you can still have an amazing time. So yeah, I know it often seems like, oh, travel, the most expensive thing in the world, that's not available to me. That's not accessible to me. But there are ways to make it cheaper. So I just want everyone to travel. I want everyone to have the amazing experience of seeing the world like I get to do. And I'm not making all the money that people think I am. So yeah, it can be more affordable than you think.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing all your experience and your Instagram so we can follow you.
Yes, I am Calum McSwiggan on Instagram and all social media. It's the same on YouTube, TikTok, etc. Calum with one L, Calum, McSwiggan, McSwiggan.
Perfect. I will also add it in the description of the video so people can
Amazing.
follow you. Thank you so much, Calum.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you.